Good morning, everybody. Um, I'm delighted to see you all here this morning online with us at UTS and at our Open Day 2021. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the ancestral lands upon which UTS sits, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Deborah Asher Barnstone, professor of architecture and head of school at UTS Architecture. So welcome to UTS Open Day 2021. We're delighted that you've decided to come today, especially in this online format, and we'll do our best to keep the day informative and interesting and fun. We're also so pleased that you're interested in our programs at UTS. UTS School of Architecture is such a unique place. We're both the oldest architecture school in Australia and one of the youngest university programs at one and the same time. This is because we are direct descendants of Sydney Technical College, which was founded in 1878 and moved to Ultimo in 1891 and was the first architecture program in Australia. In January 1990, Sydney Technical College was absorbed into and combined with several other colleges to form the present University of Technology, making us a young university, about 30 years old. Our programs were traditionally very practice-oriented. Even in the early days as a university, students worked during the day and took university classes in the evenings. Although we have long abandoned this model, we retain our close ties to local and national practice. As a student here, you will have tutors from a range of well-known practices. Even the principals will teach, lecture, and critique. Examples include Angelo Candelapis, Lee Hillam, Gerard Reinmuth, Richard Francis Jones, Mark Tyrrell, and Sasha Coles, to name just a few from architecture and landscape architecture. But today, UTS also has a strong international commitment. We bring internationally known figures to teach, to lecture, to critique, and to collaborate with our students and our academics. And we run a host of study abroad programs at both the undergraduate and postgraduate levels that include study tours to places like Japan and the United States, and design studios with travel components to Germany, the Netherlands, Japan, South Korea, and the US. Because UTS believes that international educational experiences are critical to preparing you for work in a globalized world, there's also financial support for many of our programs. And hopefully we will get out of lockdown and out of COVID-19 and be able to resume these programs. I see our guest student, Cory Arkins, smiling and nodding about this. UTS School of Architecture has built a world-class reputation for our focus on visionary architectural landscape and interior design, strategic thinking, and engagement with contemporary issues in all three professions. While a student here, you will engage with many of the salient challenges facing us today, including climate change with its knock-on effects, like rising sea levels, bushfires, droughts, and excessive heat, emerging and transformative technologies like robotic construction and design using drones, and threats to the historic fabric of Australian cities, landscapes, and communities. Innovative, creative, and committed to advancing the disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, and interior architecture, we offer an exciting and dynamic experience-based educational model that provides a rich combination of local, national, and international perspectives in design and contemporary practice. And course director Brooke Jackson is going to tell you a lot more about this in just a couple of minutes. In keeping with our combined national and international focus, you will learn with teachers from across New South Wales, Australia, and the world. We currently have permanent academic staff from Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Spain, India, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. And recent guest teachers and speakers have come from as far afield as France, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Canada, South Korea, Japan, China, Vietnam, and more. In short, I think you will find our programs exciting, challenging, rewarding, and even fun should you decide to come to study with us. I'll now hand over to the course director, Brooke Jackson, who will describe our programs in much more detail for you. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you so much, Deb. So good morning, everybody. My name is Brooke Jackson. I'm the course director of the undergraduate program here at UTS. I would also like to acknowledge current country. I am actually on Gadi, Darug and Darawal country today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So if you're here with us this morning, you're intrigued about our Bachelor of Design in Architecture, which is coming to you from within the School of Architecture in our dynamic DAB faculty, which stands for Design, Architecture and the Built Environment. Just to echo some of the points that Deb was making, at the moment in humanity, we're at a point where our social, ethical and environmental responsibility is far more prevalent than before. And we're really interested in generating future thinkers that can go out there and really make a difference. So we want to set you up to shape the future of our built environment through building and design and technology. And we're interested in doing this through not only generating amazing spaces and getting you to think about spaces in new, unique ways, but we're also going to take you through a journey of architectural history and theory to understand how we've come to be. And we're going to help you strategize through the lens of urban and suburban strategy, and most certainly deliver this through the lens of sustainable spatial practice at every scale. So our Bachelor of Design in Architecture is a 3-year full-time or equivalent program, and I'll take you through what you'll be undertaking if you join us at UTS. So over 3 years, you will have 2 semesters, the autumn and then the spring. We commence by taking you through the subject structure. So your dominant subject, which is 12 credit points, is the studio space. You have 6 studios that you undertake each semester, and each will progress from the prior. Adding to this is a really dominant history and theory stream, which starts off at the Renaissance, takes us through to the Enlightenment. You'll learn about modernism and modernity. Then we'll think about urbanism and the city. We'll also undertake a critique of the rhetoric of the discipline, and then finally evaluate current circumstances of the contemporary through current events and debates. Complementing this, of course, is all the technological understanding and rationale of built environment. So you'll be introduced to measures of construction through structural synthesis and construction methods in first year. We'll take you into the detailing components in second year. And then our 3rd year studio actually really dominates the construction lens for your Studio 5 in the autumn. And then, of course, in addition to this, is methodologies around sustainable practice. So you'll be introduced to your tech subjects, thermal design and environmental control in year 2. And then finally in year 3, you'll be advancing this environmental understanding and also engaging with principles of lighting and acoustics. And then of course your final capstone studio will synthesize this knowledge. In addition, we've got comms in first year, which really unpacks visual communication. It's really fun exploring of all of those graphic communication styles and teaches you how to draw and document as a future architect. And then of course in your final year you get to inject your studies with your choice of electives. We hold some really dynamic and interesting electives through the School of Architecture, but of course, and these are interdisciplinary between interior and landscape, so you'll be working with those students as well. But also we encourage you to undertake interdisciplinary electives across UTS, and you are able to choose from the wide scope that's available across the entire university. So let's take you into the studio spaces and what you actually can expect. So year 1 really sets you up for the foundation of how you maneuver through the logic of design thinking through process methods. And then we give you a 1 design brief in Studio 2, which takes you through program and precedent studies. So Studio 1 is a series of very short exercises that undertake a logic of thinking through process. So you'll be introduced to concepts of coding, both digital but also analog. And you'll be making things, you'll be drawing, and you'll be learning the art of iteration. And of course, we'll be thinking not only in terms of the scale of the body, but we're going to be taking to the scale of the territory. This subject is actually combined with your landscape architecture students, so you'll get really nice cross-pollination of ideas there also. And then we'll be bringing that back to the scale of 1-to-1, where you'll be undertaking some experiments and documenting these, both architecturally and curatorially. I'm actually going to ask our student, we've got a second year student, as Deb announced earlier, Corey Arkins, who's very kindly giving us his time this morning. And I'm just going to ask you, what was probably one of the main lessons that you learned in your Studio One encounter, Corey?
So probably the main lesson is probably the iterative process and the power of it. You start off with the collage, as Brooke was showing before, and you start off with the design that you think is all right. But after like a series, I think it did about 36 iterations, you really surprise yourself. And that's pretty much what architecture is, an iterative experimental process. So yeah, that process was quite surprising.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Corey. And then we move into Studio 2, where this is the first disciplinary subject that you'll engage with in design. And we give you the fundamental type, which is that of the house. So you'll be designing really conceptual ideas around domesticity and rethinking what it actually means to live and dwell today. It will take you through the disciplinary knowledge that exists through precedent case studies. You'll be dissecting building logic, of course, and then we'll be bringing you back to the scale of 1 to 100 and 1 to 50 to really design out the architectural elements of your spaces. And then we'll zoom in for a moment at 1 to 20 to really understand the intimacies of domestic dwelling at that very micro scale. And most importantly, we won't only be interested in the idea of the building as an object, but we understand that the idea of dwelling and living in a city has certainly got a lot of conceptual impetus for us to reframe how we can actually live together as a society. So we'll be getting you to think about how we can change the way that we think about the dwelling at the scale of the lot. I think this is your project here, Corey.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Yeah, great. And then we'll get you to think conceptually about how your individual lot then responds to the block, the community of the suburb, and then the city as a whole. So Corey, what was one of your favorite things about this particular project?
My favorite part of this project was I had a tutor, Sam Donnelly, that focused on model making. So I designed this, as you can see, it's like a series of kind of modules that move on train tracks depending upon what the occupant wants. I designed these through models. So I think I made over about 20 models. And instead of designing through CAD, which can be quite restricting if you don't use it in the right part of the process, it's building models really gives you a three-dimensional understanding. And it was quite enlightening to kind of experience that process through designing through models.
Fantastic. And they were fabulous models, I will vouch for, Corey, there. Okay, and also you undertake a 1-to-1 build in the construction subject, which is a really exciting component. You will be getting on the tools, designing and thinking through the scale of a pavilion, and then we actually get you to fabricate this. This is the one from 2019. And actually, I might just see if I can share a small video with you of the making in last year, 2020. Sorry, this is the 2019 version because we're not wearing masks. And there you have it in all its glory. What was really fantastic about these pavilions is not only that the students get the chance to be involved in all the processes from design, documentation, and then the build, but then the space actually becomes a moment of activation that sits in the level 4 courtyard of the DAB building, and it actually incites events that interact with the public. So moving on to year 2, and you really develop on that foundational knowledge. Studio 3 is a wild experiment in material technologies, particularly looking at sustainable practices. Students engage and embark on a range of selected material sources and then unpack these through tests, experiments, and other such gestures. And then, of course, we are delivering and resolving those material details at the scale of 1 to 100. We now move back into the public realm where we design a small public building. And of course, we then detail and document things at a scale of 1 to 50. And this complements what's happening in the construction detailing subject, where we're looking at detailing at 1 to 5. What was the favourite thing about working with the materials, Corey?
Okay, so if you look at my background behind, my material was sandstone. So through the experimentation of sandstone, I kind of came across using sandstone as a staining pigment. So the story, if you look at the roof above me, as it's a stage we're designing for the Mount Annan Botanical Garden stage, the roof became a stage to display the process of nature. So you had the sandstone pigment in the roof, and as it rained, it will kind of stain the roof. And that's what I used actual like architectural trace paper to use that, which is quite funny as well.
That's fantastic. It's good to see you exploring in different ways. And so then if we move into Studio 4, this introduces us to the first of the complex type series, the 3 that you engage with in the final conclusion of your degree. So this complex type is in fact a student housing project. And for the first time, you get to decide which tutorial you want to go with and which tutor you want to work with, because they're all delivering a particular conceptual lens. And in this circumstance, it's all to do with the student and ideas of dwelling. Of course, once again, we'll be looking at the scale of 1 to 100, and then we'll be zooming in at the individual unit scale of 1 to 50. And you'll be working in teams. So for the first time, you'll be pairing up and really exploring the notion of what it's like to engage in the design process through teamwork. Corey, what's one of the most interesting things you're finding so far? This is the studio you're undertaking at the moment.
Yeah, so we probably started the project about 2 weeks ago, but my favorite part of it is firstly, like, you get to choose your tutor. So you get to choose your conceptual focus, and my tutor, Andriana, we've got a real focus on the actual concept forming the form, rather than designing the form off like what visually looks good. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, the conceptual focus. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then, of course, moving into 3rd year, which you can look forward to, Corey, next year, hopefully back on campus, is the synthesis year, where all the ideas and learning is still being pushed and explored, but we're now looking at measures of synthesis across the subject. So Studio 5 is complex type 2, where we go rather large scale. We go out to the peripheral of Sydney, and we're really dealing with the complex types of infrastructure. Once again, you get to choose your infrastructure lens, which could be anything from a storage archive to a waste management, a water processing systems. And we'll be dealing, because we're at that much larger scale, we're looking more so at the 1 to 500, but then we zoom in again at the 1 to 1. And this is the most interesting part of the semester, where students actually physically fabricate a detail component of their buildings at the scale of 1 to 1. And we've got a really clear focus on tectonics and construction methodology injected into this particular studio. And cantilever engineers who come in for injection sessions to also contribute to the collaboration of education and learning. And then finally, this culminates in your capstone design Studio 6, which is complex type 3. We go really conceptual here through the concept of the post-work institution, and this iteration was the university. We look at integrated systems, so we're taking all that knowledge about building technologies and sustainability, and you're really working this up to a really nice level of detail, and we bring you back to the city for this project. But we also acknowledge that irrespective of where we are in Australia, we are always sited on country. And Capstone Studio is run as a competition, which is extremely exciting for our students. We've got industry partnerships with Billard Lease and Stinson's Arming, who actually contribute to the competition, and there are awards, and it's a really exciting culmination of the entire program for our students. So yes, I see some questions come through the chat. We are absolutely industry connected, both on a local and global scale. I've just listed some of the global partnerships that we currently have. We've got Arab, Billard Lease, Bangawarra, BBN, Candelapis, Cox, Hayball, of course the Registration Board, AIA, Government Architects Office, and many, many more. We really encourage our students, and a lot of our tutors come specifically from these practices and institutions beyond our institution. So we really do encourage cross connection, and we do find that a lot of our students then get plucked for placement for employment because of our industry connections. What are your career opportunities? Of course, you can become an architect. That's the main progression, and hopefully that's what you're aspiring to do. But you can also branch out. The field of architecture is extremely diverse and inclusive. You can go into academia. You can look on the development side of things and be a design manager of construction. You can obviously be an educator. You can go into policy making if you're really interested in shifting the systems by which architecture has to abide by. Of course, you can go into research, and that can be both technological or conceptual and historical. You can be an urban designer, and you can also write for journalism, for publications, architectural publications, etc. Now, the pathway to architecture registration is a big question that we usually get during our open day sessions. So of course, the simplest way to embark on that is through your Bachelor of Design in Architecture, and then follow with us staying at UTS for your really dynamic Masters of Architecture program, which is another full-time 2-year equivalent. And then you need to produce a logbook, which is generally a minimum of 2 years work experience post the Masters program, and then you're eligible for the New South Wales ARB registration exams. What are the resources here for you at the DAB faculty? We've got an amazing soft model workshop for students to use around the clock. We've also got a fabrication workshop which you will get inducted to in week 1, and you get use of far more complex devices to really get in there and really generate some incredible technological models. And included in that is laser cutting and 3D printing. And of course, then we've got the advanced fabrication lab, which is really pushing and promoting and doing a lot of research about digital fabrication and technologies. And here you see a robotic arm with Professor Tim Shaw. We've also got photography studios available to you to take photographs of those amazing models you're going to make. And of course, we've got a computer lab with all up-to-date technology and all the software that you will require to undertake your degree. And this is your space. We're missing this at the moment, aren't we, Corey? That these are yours to take over. This is your undergraduate studio. This is where the magic happens. You will undertake your classes here, but also we encourage you to use these spaces and really take ownership and enjoy making and thinking and talking in these spaces as you maneuver through your degree. And of course, we've got your library, which is your theoretical resource, this fantastic new building by FJMT, Building 2, newly finished 2 years ago, and sorry, at the beginning of last year. And it's just a really glorious space, not only to access resources, but just to sit and study, take in the views. We also have scholarships to assist. We've got the Droga Indigenous Architecture Scholarship, the Garth Barnett Scholarship, Group GSA Indigenous Architecture Scholarship. They're more early entry. And then of course, we've got the Cox Architecture Scholarship as you progress. We want you to get involved in the School of Architecture. It's not just about getting in here and doing your degree. This is an all-immersive environment, and it's a really exciting and dynamic profession to be a part of. Please join us on Instagram. This is where all our news, events, lectures, and of course student work is publicised. You can join us for some of our public lecture series. We really do encourage you to be part of industry. We've also got this wonderful exhibition space that we take over and produce different exhibitions for. We really encourage you to do extracurricular activities. And of course, we've got our end of year show, which you can volunteer to be a part of when it's back on site. It's just a really dynamic thing to be a part of. And it's a really wonderful thing to celebrate all your hard work from the year and bring your family and friends who we know are dramatic supporters throughout your education. So this is a QR code that you can scan. I do encourage you to scan that. There's some generic questions you probably all have in regards to entry and some further questions in regards to admissions. But I might just take some questions from the chat. And so, from Margaret, okay, how many students are in each degree cohort? In our first year program, we have around 200 students. So on average, you're looking at about 600 across the entire undergraduate program, about 200 a year. And what percentage of architects will go on to complete the will continue to complete the masters and become qualified architects? So we see quite a high percentage of our students maneuver into the masters program. I actually forget the actual percentage off the top of my head, but I would estimate it's about 60% of our graduating students elect to go straight into the masters. And then, yeah. So I think that answers that question for you. What type of CAD is used? Yes. So we really do encourage SketchUp is really foundational for the students' documentation. Of course, you can explore other CAD programs, but yes, SketchUp is the predominant one for us, and also the Adobe Creative Suite. What's the approximate graduate employment rate? Actually, I don't know that currently at the moment, Jess. Do we have that data that's come in? I might actually put together a pack of data and we'll include this in the DAB fact sheet. You might be able to review that there. Has COVID affected all the practical things you've shown? Okay, yes, it has. And thank you for asking that question. We are currently online. So first and foremost, the health, safety and wellbeing of our students is paramount, and our staff obviously collectively. The student cohort has been extremely agile, and I'm so thankful for the way in which they've maneuvered themselves into online. So we conduct all of our classes currently online. We did manage to get onto campus, for all of semester last year, which was fantastic. It was good to see our faces and to use the spaces. Look, we've really been working hard to try and facilitate the students as best that we can with giving them access to programs at home that usually they would be able to get on campus for those who haven't directly bought versions for themselves. So they are moving goalposts, but of course, obviously, we're really always following the New South Wales health and advice and hoping to get you back on campus ASAP. Is it possible to transfer from landscape architecture? Yes. So a lot of students like to get into one of our programs, landscape architectural interiors, and then have a change of heart and think, actually, no, I think I'm probably more interested in landscape or interior or architecture. Yes, you can certainly apply to transfer. You still will apply through UAC and go through that process again. But then what you would do is apply for an internal request for prior learning so that we can give you credit points for subjects where they correlate across the programs. Will there be a double degree of architecture and engineering available? That is a really interesting question. Currently, we do not actually advertise that, but we have been looking into opportunities around that, but there's not one currently. So how many subjects does each semester have? So if you're doing a full-time load, you will be undertaking 3 subjects per semester. Your studio is 12 credit points and has 2 3-hour sessions per week in addition to lectures. And then you've got 2 6 credit point subjects in addition. So it's a total of 24 hours face-to-face in addition to the work that is prescribed and assigned to you in your downtime. What electives do you need to take? I don't think there's actually any prerequisite in terms of electives. I think you're talking about high school. I guess we do encourage you to take all the, there's no really any prerequisite, but if there's anything that you're personally interested in an elective in school, such as D&T or art, that might prove useful to you if you're already getting a head start in some of the programs and software that we use, but there's no asserted prerequisite. This is a nice one. What's the rate of their What's the ratio between learning traditional skills such as hand-drawn plan or drawing, or between CAD? This is a very interesting question. It might just sign us off actually before, and if you've got further questions, if I haven't got to them, please migrate to the one-on-one advisory chat. So it's really important that you do continue your questions over there. We've got academics in the school and student sprouts to help answer your questions. What was the question there for? I just lost that last question.
What's the ratio between learning traditional skills?
Okay, sorry, thank you so much.
All good.
Thank you, Jess, for reminding me. We really do encourage you to do hand drawing. You're not taught technical drawing any longer. That art form, unfortunately, is by the wayside. You do undertake some measure of hand drawing, but we do encourage hand sketching. But we would jump you into CAD documentation in the first semester also. So none of your design studios beyond Studio 1 has a lot of technical drawing through hand. Sketching, yes, and technical stuff is done on the computer. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, today. Hope you're interested in coming to join us here at UTS. Thank you, Corey. It's lovely to see you. I will be picking this up again in the one-on-one chats, and you'll be also met by some of our academic staff. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.